What's going on, folks? It's your boy Manpreet here to break down another Contender series card for you guys. As you guys can hear, not feeling the greatest. Been battling some tonsillitis over the last few days. Just feeling like absolute crap, but I know you guys kind of lean on your boy for getting some Contender series info and breakdowns, so I don't want to miss out on you guys. In terms of the UFC breakdowns, I'll still try to have that out for you guys Tuesday. Might have to push it to Wednesday. A little behind on my studying at the moment, not to mention a bunch of other fights and events going down this week as well. So I'm going to do my best to get through it all and provide you guys with as much of the breakdowns as I can. In terms of these Contender Series breakdowns, I'm going to be as brief as possible. Not a lot of explaining that I'm going to be looking to do here, trying to save my voice. I'll be editing this quite a lot, as there will be a lot of coughing that I'm sure you guys do not want to hear me do into the mic. So I'm going to get through this ASAP and as briefly as possible. Solid card. I thought last week's was better, probably because there's a lot of chalky favorites on this card that should end up coming through, but let's see if we can get through the weeds and see which ones we should actually trust with our money, and if there's any props that we could take advantage of as well. All right, let's get right into it. First fight of the night, Billy Brand, plus 125, going up against Cody Haddon, coming in at minus 155. Billy Brand, a California prospect, training at a Team Alpha Male and a handful of other gyms in that area, has a 5-1 record, with his lone defeat coming at the hands of Peyton Talbot, who they went to war. That fight was in February of 2022, back and forth fight, but ultimately Talbot ends up coming out on top by knocking him out in the third round. But other than that, Brand has managed to put together, I believe, 4 straight wins since that matchup, knocking 3 of those opponents out. Faced some decent regional competition, has amazing striking. I love what he brings to the table. Fast, quick combinations, good. His grappling is improving steadily. Defensive grappling, not that bad either, but does a great job in terms of asserting his dominance in the striking realm and walking his opponents down and trying to knock them out. This kid has a ton of potential, but another kid that has a ton of potential is his opponent, Cody Haddon, training out of Australia, BJJ black belt, 6-1, lone defeat coming to a UFC fighter as well in the form of Steam Ursig. That was a back and forth fight as well, but Ursig ended up coming out on top by decision. Haddon has some good striking of his own. His BJJ is very sneaky as well. I'm not entirely sold on his wrestling game as of yet, but it's certain that once he does get fights to the ground, he's very effective in terms of implementing that top pressure. He had a 5-0 run on the amateur scene as well. This is a fun fight. You know, this reminds me of Anton Ho against Loney Kavanaugh last week. Both, lower weight classes. Both guys probably already deserving of being in the UFC. But I'm going to have to lean ever so slightly to the Billy Brand side, because I expect the majority of this fight to take place in the striking realm. And I think we'll see Brand have the better of those exchanges. I think he's just a little bit faster, a little bit crisper, and has a tad more power. And that could end up with him flatlining Haddon in the spot. Again, this will be a competitive fight. The odds, in my opinion, should be a little bit closer as well, but I do think that Brand is the side here, and I'll back him, and probably even by knockout. Next up, Cam Rowston, plus 295, going up against Torrance Finney, coming in at minus 370. Rowston is a city kickboxing product, training alongside Israel Adesanya for the last couple of years. He's a BJJ purple belt. He's long and lanky for the division. He usually has a size and reach advantage over all of his opponents. Good Muay Thai, good shots down the pipe, has some decent grappling when he wants to lean on it. He is very hittable, though. He is a guy that I've seen get rocked a couple times, even in his last loss. That's how he got knocked out, just a little bit too hittable. But when he is locked in, when he is in a flow state, it's hard to really clip him and hard to get a beat on what he's trying to do. Just has not been all that active either. He's pulled out of 5 fights since 2019, and he's only competed twice since 2020. So I don't really understand why the UFC has decided to give him a shot, considering his inactivity. But there was even a fighter last week that was given this spot, even though he was very inactive. So Yeah, I feel just there's so many other more deserving regional fighters that should get this spot and who have been active, who have been busting their ass. But Rowston, probably with his city kickboxing connections, was able to get this opportunity. He's going up against Torres Finney, who is now 8-0, fought on last season's Contender Series and got rocked badly in the first round, but managed to get back to his grappling and eventually find a rear naked choke in the second round. This man is a behemoth in terms of the size that he brings to the table, not just with his height. He's only 5'8", but he has a 75-inch reach and is just absolutely stacked. You know, you guys want to talk about William Knight and Tefon and Chukwi and those guys that just look completely stacked. This guy at 185 is another beast. You know, he's a fire hydrant of a man. But I'm very impressed with his ability to grapple his opponents and still go 15 minutes with his dominance if he needs to. His striking is a little bit wide, but his grappling is where he gets his best work done. Once he's able to get his hands around his opponents, which is not hard to do considering the reach that he has. He usually does a great job in terms of picking his opponents up and just slamming them on the mat, and then doing a great job in terms of keeping them on the ground, landing big shots, and eventually finding a finish when he needs to. And his ability to do it over 15 minutes is even more impressive, considering when you see guys like him, or even, you know, as built as him or nearly as built as him, they usually slow down within 4 or 5 minutes. But this guy does a great job in terms of sticking to the grind and breaking his opponents while doing so. He didn't get the contract last season because Dana said he saw a lot of holes in his game. You wanted him to get a little bit more fights before coming back. He only got one more fight in that amount of time, where he knocked out a 15-12 opponent back in May, knocking him dead out cold. It was a very, very bad knockout. And I guess that was enough for the UFC to be like, all right, let's bring this kid back. Now, going up against Rowston, we saw the pictures already of the size difference between these two. I believe it's a 6 or 7 inch height advantage for Rowston, although the reach will probably be a lot closer considering Finney's insane 75-inch reach that he brings to the table. Rowston, better striker, but I think he's going to struggle to establish that range as Finney crashes the pocket very effectively. As long as Finney doesn't walk into a knee or an uppercut of some sort, he should be able to get this fight to the ground, and then he should be able to smash Rowston from that top position. Rowston will have some decent resistance early, but I think that Finney will eventually wear on him, break him, and then eventually finish him as well. Plus 600 on Rowston by knockout, not a bad hedge if you're looking to back Finney in the spot, but I think Finney eventually gets that dominant position and finds a TKO. I wouldn't even count out Finney throwing wildly on the feet to catch Rowston, and that could potentially put Rowston out as well, but I think Finney wins this matchup pretty easily. Maybe not worth the chalky price considering the openings that he leaves in the striking realm. Next up, Cortavius Romious coming in at minus 345, going up against Michael Imperato, who comes in at plus 270. Romious came in with probably the worst game plan I've ever seen from a fighter last time around, as you take on, or 2 fights ago, as he took on Ramon Tavares in week 10 of the last season Contender Series. And Romious actually came in as the favorite in that matchup due to the grappling edges that he was supposed to have there. Unfortunately for him, he decided to just strike with Tavares and strike recklessly, which ended up with him getting knocked out pretty badly. Romious, much better fighter than what he showed that night. He's very good in terms of dragging opponents to the ground and grinding them out, finding submissions or even finishing them from that top position. And I think that if he chooses to utilize that more emphatically moving forward, he would be a lot more successful than what we saw in that Tavares fight. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't strike at all. Like, he has some decent power and he has some good striking, but to do it against a guy that's a significantly better striker than him, like Tavares, was probably not the best way to go about it. His opponent this weekend, Michael Imperato, comes in at plus 270, a Torontonian, training up in my neck of the woods, but this kid's had a roller coaster of a MMA career. He was actually scheduled to fight Aljamain Sterling back in October of 2014, but there was an incident from earlier in his career that was brought to light, and then the UFC decided to rescind his offer due to that. Then he went on a 3-fight losing streak, bounced back with a 3-fight winning streak, and now is 2-2 over his last 4 fights. But luckily, his last fight, which was a victory, came on the Dana White Contender Series event at Unified MMA 55, and Dana decided to give him an opportunity due to that quick victory that he got over Ricky Bandejas. Imperato is a BJJ black belt. He's very good when he can get fights to the ground and get to that submission game, but if fights start to get into deeper water and he's dealing with an opponent that can stop his takedowns and keep him in the striking realm, that's where he's usually going to end up coming up short. Now, in this matchup against Romious, I think Romious is the better striker by a mile, and I think Imperato will struggle to get this fight to the ground. Romious is a BJJ purple belt, and I think that would be good enough for him to at least keep this fight safe enough for himself, but I do think that we'll see him keep this fight in the striking realm, eventually find a big shot, and I think that will lead to him knocking Imperato out in the spot. Obviously, Imperato will be very dangerous if this fight hits the mat, so I can't 100% get behind that minus 345 on Romious, but I do think he ends up winning this matchup, and I would rather lean to the knockout prop than his money line. All right, next up, Rizvan Kuniev coming in at minus 625, going up against Hugo Cunha coming in at plus 450. Kuniev obviously got his shot on the Contender Series back in 2021. He got the victory. He got the third round finish over his opponent, but Dana was not impressed at all considering the slow grind that Kuniev applied, and then also the fact that his opponent was apparently a light heavyweight and Dana expected him to get him out of there quicker. Kuniev did pick up 2 more wins since that matchup. Hasn't stayed all that active. Most recently getting a win over Haddon last year. Unfortunately, he popped for all of the substances and was eliminated from the PFO tournament that season. That fight ended up getting changed to a no contest, and the UFC has still decided to give him an opportunity. He has some solid power on the strikes that he throws and his punches and kicks. I think he does his best work when he's able to push his opponents on the cage, drag them to the ground, and eventually grind them out from that top position. And I do think that he is a guy that can be very successful in the UFC should he get the contract, but let's see if he can put on an impressive enough performance for Dana to actually give him the shot this time. He's going up against Hugo Cunha, who is the current LFA heavyweight champion. He's on a 2-fight winning streak, finishing both of those matchups. He's a BJJ black belt, although his wrestling is not that great. So if opponents can keep him in the standing realm, things could get a little bit shaky for him. We saw that actually in his LFA championship winning performance against Eduardo Neves, who is a former Contender Series participant as well. Neves was able to hurt him in the first round and hurt him multiple times until Cunha was finally able to drag him to the ground as Neves was starting to suck for wind, and Cunha was able to get the finish in the second round there and earn the victory. He's a solid fighter, but I just think he needs to improve his wrestling a little bit more, and now trying to out-wrestle a guy like Kuniev, I think is going to be a big trouble for him. I think we'll see Kuniev do a good job in terms of dictating where this fight takes place. Even if he takes this fight to the ground, I think Cunha is not as good off of his back as he is when he's on top of his opponent, especially with his BJJ black belt. So I do think Kuniev slowly drives. Sorry, the sickness is getting to me. I apologize, guys. I think Kuniev slowly breaks down Cunha and eventually gets him out of there. Probably TKOs him in the second or third round from top position. All right, main event, we got Andreas Berg Gustafsson going up against Pat Pytlik, minus 270 on Gustafsson, plus 210 on Pytlik. Gustafsson rides a 2-fight winning streak. His 2 losses that he has on his record were against some notable regional guys. The first of which was a split decision loss to a Polish Olympic wrestler and Damian Janikowski, and then the other one was to Joelton Luderbach, which was a close decision loss, if I'm not mistaken. Gustafsson loves a war, loves to mix it up in the pocket, but he also tries to bully his opponents in the clinch, looking to take them to the mat and try to finish them there. His wrestling, not the greatest, but he is very physical and strong and difficult to deal with when he starts to get his groove going in the clinch and tying his opponents up. He's nothing special. He's 33 years old. I think he has an entertaining fighting style, but in terms of being technical, or at least being somebody that could end up being a UFC contender, I just don't think that's going to happen for him. His opponent this weekend is a Canadian, another one from my neck of the woods, and Pat Pytlik. He comes from a Muay Thai background. He started his MMA career in 2014 and went 7-0 over the first 5 years, and then he eventually ran into a former UFC fighter in Jake Lindsay and suffered a loss that night. He took over 3.5 years off after that matchup and has bounced back with back-to-back knockout victories over a tough alum in Michael Hill, and then he ended up beating a previously hyped regional prospect in Ryan Leninger. Pytlik with a ton of power, nasty Muay Thai, very good in the clinch with his knees to the body and elbows and close, but he has a lot of power. He is 35, I believe, but Dana has already stated, because Dana saw him compete on the last Looking for a Fight, and he told Pytlik, I'm not looking for 34, 35-year-olds, but given what you did in the cage that night, he wanted to give him an opportunity. So he's going to need a similar type of performance, looking to quickly knock out his opponent here if he hopes to get to the UFC. But I know he trains with some good guys. I know they're going to be honing in on trying to keep fights upright. He's been dealing with guys trying to take him down for the majority of his career, considering the Muay Thai background that he brings to the table. But I do think that Pytlik could make this closer than the line indicates here. I think Gustafsson's wrestling is not the greatest, and I think he's going to struggle to get Pytlik to the ground, especially when he tries to, that buffer zone of pushing Pytlik against the cage and trying to get him to the ground, because Pytlik is so good in the clinch and landing his knees and landing damage. So I'm not overly confident in the spot, but I am going to lean Pytlik here. I do think we'll see Pytlik damage Gustafsson enough here, and I think it'll eventually lead to a knockout. Plus 210 is not a bad line to take a bit of a shot on. Even his knockout proper on plus 400 is not too bad. But I don't know. I'm gonna think about it probably until even fight time if I end up having an official wager on the spot. But I do think Pytlik could make this much tougher on Gustafsson than the odds indicate here. So I'm gonna go Pytlik by knockout. There you guys go. Breakdowns for week 2 of the Contender series. I have a ton of researching that I need to get done for this week. We have LFA 190, PFL 9, Road to UFC, KSW, and UFC going down all this week. So for me to kick off the week with this illness, not the greatest of things, but I will be working hard over the next couple of days to get breakdowns out for you guys. I will have the full card breakdown for PFL out for you guys probably by Thursday at this rate. The UFC one will hopefully be out by Tuesday or Wednesday, and then written breakdowns for LFA, Road to UFC, and KSW will all be on the Patreon page. Appreciate you guys bearing with me, bearing with my voice, bearing with the lack of video as well, but hopefully we can get back to normal as of tomorrow or Wednesday. Good luck on all your actions, folks, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Peace.